welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now,
Jimothy.
So ladies and gents, welcome back, and I thought I would do something different today, which is quote unquote react or give my thoughts and opinions on Rogue Hero's video on the truth about rogue decks. Now this is something that's quite close to my heart, and it's something that I've been speaking to with various people at my locals, which seems to be really interesting because they're feeling a little bit choked out of the metagame because of the existence of more so Detonator as well as the existence of malice, so to speak. So I just wanted to give my thoughts and opinions. Now in the background you can see some gameplay of me playing Sword Soul. I think this was not the last locals that I went to, but the one before that, my midweek locals. I managed to top with Sword Soul, which is really interesting because the week before I managed to go X3 or something like that. I literally lost every single game. I changed up the build a little bit, and then I was just way more fortunate just with a few things, and that kind of led me onto this video, to be honest, because playing Sword Soul, it's nowhere near a meta deck. It's very rogue. There was a lot of things that had to go right in order for me to win locals with Sword Soul. So it was an interesting one. But jumping straight into the topic, rogue decks, in my opinion, take a lot of skill. They take a lot of skill in terms of technical play as well as deck building, because you need to be on point. The thing about rogue decks is you've definitely got a plan for the meta, but you've also got a plan for other tier decks, so like tier 1, tier 2 decks, and be able to beat them. So your deck has to have a clear win condition, and you need to be very cognizant of that win condition in order to be successful with the deck. So you have to build your deck accordingly. You have to put the correct text in, the correct, you have to obviously make sure you sequence your plays in an order that's most optimal, and you have to do that literally for every single game you play because you are up against it. Rogue decks typically don't have as much extension, maybe as much follow-up, even like field presence as the quote-unquote meta deck, so they're always going to be at a disadvantage. And for some people, including myself, that's something that I really enjoy, kind of like being an underdog, doing something a little bit different from what everybody else is doing and trying to win. However, there is a clear night and day difference with playing with a rogue deck and playing with a meta deck. It's like outlandish thinking about it. But obviously Rogue Hero was basically saying that you can't realistically win without a floodgate, and that's something that I somewhat disagree with. Depending on the rogue deck you play, not all rogue decks need to facilitate a floodgate in order to win. Some rogue decks just like to go second and just like OTK, or Sky Striker, for example, likes to just go second and dwindle you out of resources, not necessarily playing in any kind of specific floodgate, although they are known for playing a few floodgates. But yeah, there's loads of different strategies out there, which is something that makes Yu-Gi-Oh like really great, because there's so many things and so many ways that you can go with it. You can actually do a lot with the decks that are out there, but I do feel like rogue decks and rogue players probably don't get the justice that they deserve in terms of recognition, because despite having a strong showing, they don't typically top too much, and when a rogue deck does top, it goes absolutely viral because it's just unheard of, especially in today's day and age in Yu-Gi-Oh, where meta decks are just so efficient at doing what they need to do. Engines are a lot smaller, non-engines are a lot bigger, like hand traps are everywhere, because letting your opponent go off even with a rogue deck just is almost like a death sentence basically. So it's really important that like rogue decks can keep up, but like meta decks are just so far ahead. So in my opinion, you don't need a floodgate to win. Technical play can get you there. I think of like Dinkabui technically playing a rogue deck, won YCS Birmingham. I was there, half the room was Rizal, half the room was Malice, and there was like a spluttering of some other random decks that were in the building, and Fire King won. Now obviously Dinkabui is a very talented Yu-Gi-Oh player, so take nothing away from him. He made a great meta call. He played fantastically. A lot of things went right as well. He had a lot of luck as well as a lot of skill, and that's something that you typically need to play or need to do in order to kind of like be successful at playing a rogue deck. Now Rogue Hero also went on to state that rogue decks typically do well when your opponent has a lack of matchup knowledge or a lack of interaction knowledge, basically, in order to be able to interact with your deck optimally. Now I will agree, that definitely comes into play, but that's not the only that's not the only reason why rogue decks can do well, and do well. Again, a lot of it is down to the player and their ability to deck build for a given event. I think even Pack, for example, obviously he's one of the more decorated players out there. I remember him doing a Centurion deck profile not too long ago, and it was a very solid meta call for a very specific time in Yu-Gi-Oh! In terms of the meta game, and it actually paid him dividends. Like, he did really well with that deck at YCS, I believe, and that was a rogue strategy, but because he had a great matchup knowledge, his technical play was obviously good because it's Pack, he was able to be really successful. And I do feel like rogue decks have a place in Yu-Gi-Oh! They need to. If they don't, then the metagame is going to look extremely boring. And even for me, for example, like I managed to win the OTS with Malice, and Malice is a meta deck that typically I don't really touch meta decks too much, but a little bit like Rogue Hero, if I find a meta deck that I like, I will definitely jump in and play with it. Now, I didn't really like Malice to start off with. I just found myself picking the cards up, and then after playing it a couple of times and getting into the deck, I really like it. It's very enjoyable. It's not as strong as Warzio, but it is very strong and very oppressive. However, it still requires a little bit of technical knowledge, skill to play. It's not just a walk in the park. You can lose some games. I played against what's it called, Speedroids at locals this Saturday gone, and it put up a good fight. Like, it just kept extending, and there was a point where I'd blown all my Malice interactions and I got my field wiped. Now, fortunately for me, that was the last interaction on their behalf, but it just goes to show that even some rogue decks can actually put up a fight, and if you're not correctly playing, it's a lot more difficult to kind of like be successful with them. But what I will say is, all in all, like, rogue decks have a place in the metagame. They're needed. Players feel a little bit throttled at the moment because of the prevalence of Malice and Rizio, because they seem to be so way far and above some of the rogue decks that are out there in terms of consistency and power. But they're needed, and I do think that rogue decks can win without Floodgates. They can win based on deck building ability and technical play. And they can be fun, and I think that's one of the things that's heavily overlooked. People play rogue because it is fun. I play rogue because it's fun. Every now and again I'll just pick up a random rogue deck that I feel like is enjoyable. For example, I'm going to play Gladiator Beast within the next couple of weeks. I know it's nowhere near the meta, like, it takes a lot to get the combo going, but it's something that intrigues me, and I think that I'd find it fun regardless of the result. And I feel like a lot of players will do that, but players that take rogue decks to YCSs, they definitely have taken a time out to kind of like think about what it is that they're going to be playing against and how to be successful. And I think that shouldn't be underlooked or overlooked, so to speak, because there is some validity to that. Like, if you prep for a meta game, you will be successful. But that is enough of me just waffling on. Hopefully you've enjoyed the gameplay in the background. And what are your thoughts? Do you think rogue decks can only win with Floodgates? Do you think there's a little bit more nuance to it? I personally do, but what do you think? Let me know in that comment section below. And we find ourselves at the end of another video. As always, if you did enjoy this content, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that beautiful good stuff, and I will definitely see you guys on the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.